Washington, D.C. and Pentagon between the Israeli and the Lebanese side. We're going to discuss all of it, Your Excellency. Thank you very much for talking to us and coming to us on NewsX. Coming to us to speak to us on NewsX.
Thank you, Megha. It's a pleasure.
Of course, I'm going to start my conversation with this very important, significant visit that has been made by the Director General of the Israeli Ministry of Defense. He has met with the External Affairs Minister of India, Rajnath Singh, talking about the need for expanding the ambit of the special strategic partnership that India and Israel at this point of time enjoy. If you could tell us more about it.
Well, yes, since the visit of Prime Minister Modi in Israel and his agreement with Prime Minister Netanyahu, we've been engaging in intensive talks to prioritize and expand and identify the set of new projects we are going to engage between our two security establishments to foster solutions in order to deal with the challenges we have.
Right, absolutely. Talking about how the relationship between India and Israel has expanded over the past several decades, especially during the last visit of Prime Minister Narendra Modi. He had met Prime Minister Netanyahu. This was right before the strikes that happened against Iran. How do you see this relationship growing over the course of the months and the years?
Well, it's very significant because what this delegation came to do is to basically implement the agreements we signed ahead of Prime Minister Modi's visit to identify specific projects that deal with new technologies, more advanced solutions, things we haven't been doing before. So this is a new step, a new stage in which we are putting content into this special strategic partnership, and things are moving very fast. We're having working groups in order to go not only identify but also agree about the implementation of all these new projects.
Absolutely. Shifting our focus to the Israel-India relationship and the way forward, I am also, of course, going to speak to you about the Bergenstock mechanism talks that are taking place even as we speak. There have been, in fact, a number of sanctions relief, if one may call it, that have been granted by United States of America to Iran, especially when it comes to its export of oil. How do you view this fresh development, and how do you think these sanctions are going to aid Iran, and more importantly, is it going to help in reducing, mitigating this global oil crisis that the world is seeing?
Well, first of all, this very partial sanction relief is a drop of water in the ocean of damage we have caused to the Iranian regime. The military campaign that we conducted was very successful, Megha, because not only that Israel, following the atrocious attacks on the 7th of October, managed to create buffer zones both in Gaza, Syria and Lebanon, but also we have removed these two existential threats that were looming on our country, the military nuclear threat and the ballistic missile threat. We completely erased their industry. So whatever relief is being given now is very partial and is not going to be able to solve the challenges that this regime has. So they are going to have to basically be pending on a successful negotiation that hopefully from the Israel point of view will address all the questions that are still pending. Like, for example, the future of their nuclear program. We want it removed. There are things that are not in the MOU, like capping the ballistic missile program and things that have to do with their proxies. So all of these things will have to be discussed from our perspective.
Right, but how do you view these talks taking place? We saw a lot of these theatrics playing out. From the US side, it was J.D. Vance, the Vice President of United States of America, who was negotiating with the mediators that were Pakistan and Qatar, and of course Iranian leadership also present in Bergenstock. We saw that the Iranian leadership refused to greet J.D. Vance. In fact, the Qatari leadership that was representing the country of Qatar also was not in the best of terms when it came to greeting J.D. Vance. Those made the headlines yesterday with regards to all that was happening. Do you feel Israel should also have been part of these multi-member negotiation that is currently in place?
Well, first of all, I see that there is a lot of positioning and Iranian propaganda, and I think this is very important for them because they want to show themselves as victorious and cover the huge gap there is between what they have decided to do and the situation on the ground. We are seeing that only a few months after we have taken out not only their military capability, but also their leadership, including the so-called supreme leader, they are coming back to the table to negotiate with the United States after they stated time and again they will never negotiate with the Trump administration. Not only that the Straits of Hormuz are being opened and there is and this is a temporary ceasefire. So we see here that there is a lot of Iranian weakness, and they are trying to cover it as sounding victorious and forceful and putting conditions on the negotiation. But at the end of the day, we have to look at the bottom line, the results. Unfortunately, Israel is not part of the negotiation because Iran has never recognized the state of Israel, and they still are swearing to annihilate us. It's wasn't only done by the previous supreme leader, but this chairman of the negotiations, Galibaf, he's been swearing to conquer Jerusalem only 3 days ago. So Israel has nothing to negotiate with Iran. We would like to see a situation in which this regime will change course, but right now it's not in the cards.
We also saw, just a couple of days ago, the Vice President of the United States of America, J.D. Vance, going ahead and warning the Israeli leadership of criticizing or attacking the Trump administration over the MOU that has been signed in France just a few days ago. What do you make of these comments, these commentary coming in from the U.S. leadership against the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and the cabinet itself that has been extremely critical of this MOU?
Well, first of all, Vice President Vance was referring to comments of certain members of cabinet from parties in the coalition of the government. But the Prime Minister of Israel has been very clear. We have a democratic system and different parties in the coalition, but the Prime Minister has been very clear that, first of all, we appreciate what the United States has done with Israel in terms of dealing with a military threat. And he said that we are going to continue engaging with the United States because at the end of the day, we share the same goals. We want to see this regime in Iran neutralized from threats that threaten the peace of Israel in the region. And we have to be patient, take a deep breath, and see what these negotiations will bring.
Does Israel in any way feel betrayed by United States of America and particularly US President Donald Trump in terms of shifting goalposts? Because at one point of time, the Trump administration, led by the president himself, were in full support of a complete regime change in terms of the large-scale protests that had happened a few months ago in Iran. But at this point of time, I think the sole focus of the Trump administration remains to suspend the nuclear program in Iran, versus the regime change that had been demanded by Israel as well at one point of time by Trump administration.
No, I think that there is a narrative that's being created as if the goalposts have been shifting. We were very clear, and I was also clear in previous interviews with you, that the aim of the operation that we launched against the Iranian regime was to remove two existential threats and prepare the ground for the Iranian people in the future, to embrace their future, but not, the talks about regime change were just talks. We didn't have an operational plan to invade Iran in order to change the regime there. What I think is happening right now is that people in Israel have concerns, legitimate concerns, regarding the outcome of the negotiation, because in the language of the MOU, some of the concerns of Israel aren't addressed, like, for example, the cap on ballistic missile industry in Iran, or the eventual future of the removal of the Iranian military nuclear threat, or the issue of the proxies. I think that this MOU is limited in scope, basically an exchange of partial removal of sanctions for the opening of Hormuz, a clear statement by the Iranians that they don't want to go for nuclear weapons. But we don't believe Iran, and I don't think that anybody believes Iran. At the end of the day, we'll have to see whether this negotiation can bring us to a verifiable outcome. And that's why we have to, give a chance to the American administration to do what they have to do. In the meantime, what Israel is doing is keeping its interests when it comes to the security situation in northern Israel. Because as you know, the situation in the south is pretty stable. Our communities are safe following the operation in Gaza. But in the north, there are still threats that are coming from Hezbollah. Hezbollah is very weakened, but yet capable of threatening our communities and our forces. So Israel will continue negotiating with the Lebanese government to try to get into a security arrangement that will allow the disbandment of Hezbollah forces in South Lebanon and the entrance of the legitimate Lebanese army forces that are under the responsibility of the Lebanese government. We don't want, and I think Lebanon doesn't want, to surrender to the Tehran agenda. And I think here we have a common interest and a common challenge.
The fifth round of negotiations are going to take place later today in DC. There is, of course, the Israeli leadership, representatives of Israel and representatives of Lebanon are going to again be part of those conversations. What can be expected out of this?
What we are trying to do is not only agree on a peace treaty that will completely finish the situation of hostility between Lebanon and Israel, because Israel doesn't have any territorial claims over Lebanon, but also we are trying to experiment a pilot project that will gradually grant responsibility to the Lebanese army over the territory in a way that will prevent the return of infiltrations of Hezbollah terrorists and the building of terrorist infrastructure near our border.
Talking about one of the key clauses, which was number one clause condition that had been put forth by Iran for the complete ceasefire and opening of the Strait of Hormuz, was it hyphenating itself with Lebanon. Military operations on all fronts need to end is what was expected, what was demanded of the Iranian leadership, which included Lebanon as well. Do you think United States has acceded to that condition of Iran?
We all have agreed to a ceasefire, but what was happening, Mega, was a situation in which Tehran was trying to put a wedge between the United States and Israel by ordering Hezbollah to continue firing at Israel, forcing Israel to retaliate. So actually this was a premeditated effort by Iran to achieve two things: to put a wedge between Israel and the United States, and also to try to continue dictating the future of Lebanon. We are not going to allow that. Neither the government of Lebanon wants to allow that. And therefore, we are going to be stubborn in keeping our security interests, and Iran will have no say whatsoever on the security arrangements in South Lebanon.
Do you also think it would be beneficial for Israel and Lebanon to close this round of negotiations as soon as possible before this conversation with regards to strikes and counterstrikes between Israel and Hezbollah further escalate, and those conversations start taking place in the negotiations that are currently taking place in Switzerland and Bergenstock? Do you think there could be more pressure that could be put by Iran on the United States of America to somehow stop Israel from its targeting of Hezbollah on its northern border?
Well, the pressure is on Iran. They are trying to portray as if time is working for them. Time is not working for them. There is a time period of 60 days. Within these 60 days, they have to reach an agreement with the United States that is satisfying. And when it comes to Lebanon, we'll continue keeping our interests there. We will continue negotiating with the Lebanese government, but we are not in a rush. We are standing pretty firm in our positions in the yellow line. And we will continue keeping these positions as long as we feel insecure regarding future arrangements. So that will be negotiated. At the end of the day, people have to understand this is not just about creating a theoretical outcome, because we already had that outcome in the past with UN Security Council Resolution 1701 that wasn't implemented. We want a solution that can be implemented and actually will work and will actually prevent Hezbollah from returning to the border, and not what we've seen in the past with peacekeeping forces that were coming, but not really understanding what is happening physically underneath their feet. We've seen, you probably saw the pictures of the huge underground facility that we have discovered in Majd al-Zoun in South Lebanon, with a factory to produce drones and shafts for fire against Israel. This is something that has to be removed. And unless all this infrastructure is removed and we verify that it cannot build again, we will stay at the yellow line.
There's also talks of this new deconfliction mechanism for Lebanon that has been proposed by the Vice President of America. Do you foresee any involvement of Hezbollah as a third party in this conversation?
Well, at the end of the day, Hezbollah will have to accept the conditions put by the legitimate government of Lebanon that was elected not long ago. So this is the challenge. You have terrorist forces supported by the regime in Iran that are not willing to bow to the democratically elected government of Lebanon. We have a challenge with that. If the United States and the regional players put enough diplomatic pressure on Iran and on Hezbollah, we might have a situation in which actually these peace negotiations will succeed. But right now, what Hezbollah is trying to do is to challenge the peace negotiations and to delegitimize them. So this will require much more work until we reach a solution.
Right, absolutely. Finally, last question before I let you go, Ambassador Reuven Azar, talking about the 14-point MOU, the agreement that has been signed between both sides, are all the terms and clauses of the agreement acceptable to Israel, particularly when it comes to Iran being allowed to have ballistic missiles? That was also one of the biggest concerns for Israel and United States of America not too far long ago. Ending all military operations at all fronts, including Lebanon. Talking about lifting of economic sanctions, including sanctions on Iranian oil. There at this point of time, conversations taking place in the period of the 60-day ceasefire about its nuclear program, suspension of the nuclear program, that the talks are ongoing, and that $300 billion fund that has been created for the reconstruction of Iran, and many others. Are these clauses and conditions acceptable to Israel?
Well, first of all, you have to read carefully into the articles of this MOU, because many of the things that are mentioned there are only going to happen if Iran actually accepts the conditions set by the United States and actually gets to an agreement that will verifiably remove these existential threats. If that happens, then there is an option for them to enjoy economic benefits. But this is conditioned. And therefore, this MOU is a very, very partial situation that may lead us back to military operation or lead us back to an agreement. We'll have to wait and see.
Your Excellency Reuven Azar, thank you very much for speaking to us on NewsX.
My pleasure.
Well, with that, I wrap up this conversation with the Israeli ambassador to India. Thanks for watching NewsX.